Welcome to How to Yugioh.
Let's explain Mulcharmy consequences. Alrighty then. So, in this video, I'm going to talk about the consequences of Mulcharmy. With that being said, let's get on with the rest of the video. Now, I'm going to now talk about the consequences of Mulcharmy. So, from what I've seen so far, in the TCG anyway, things have changed, I can see, for the better. Especially when it comes to the meta scene, the competitive scene. I like the discussions that pro players and professional players of Yu-Gi-Oh! Are talking now. I like their tone of voice. I like the discussions that they're having. All of a sudden, pro players are talking about cooperation, are talking about respecting the opponent opposite and respecting the hand traps, respecting play, and talking about a two-player game. The fact that we have gone from a fast tempo meta scene to a slow tempo meta scene with the release of Mulcharmy Fuel Loss is absolutely fantastic. The fact that its existence has forced the game to become slower, because this is one thing I think the casual minority of the player base, majority of the player base, and newcomers, we've all been saying the same thing. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is way too fast and needs to be slowed down. And the fact that we've had that and one card has done that, which is Mulcharmy Fuel Loss, I am liking it. Sure, is the card expensive? Absolutely. Can no one afford it? That's true. But I am going to give credit where credit is due. The metagame is slower. We still have a long way to go in terms of fixing Yu-Gi-Oh! Do not get it twisted, don't get it wrong. But one of the biggest issues and one of the biggest complaints we have had as majority in the community, the game needs to get slower. It is now slower. Okay, the fact that a deck like Centurion, which only makes one extra deck monster per turn, it is a quite mid-range deck, is now one of the best decks in Yu-Gi-Oh! And TCG, is a fantastic thing to think about. The fact that I can tell any one of you guys right now that you can take a mid-range deck, a deck that you can afford, and go to a competitive scene, and you can potentially do quite well in it. For example, we've had decks like Phantasm Spiral with the Primite. This is a new archetype coming out in the Rage of the Abyss. Very cheap archetype, and it's been doing wonders. We're seeing loads of decks that didn't used to do anything before, topping regionals, topping YCSs, and doing loads of fantastic things. This is a fantastic time to play Yu-Gi-Oh! Do you need the Mulcharmy cards? The pro players would say you do. I would argue and say you don't. They exist. I would say the Mulcharmys exist for the pro players. They exist so that the rest of the player base doesn't have to get them. We don't need to get them. They exist so that the toxic of those decks, the toxicity of those special summoning decks, the decks that special summon for days, the decks that do all this just ridiculous and utter nonsense, are curbed out and weeded out from Yu-Gi-Oh! The fact that a deck like pure Snake Eye is now not a competitive deck, to me, that is a sign of things going in the right direction. The playstyle that Snake Eye was doing, the playstyle that Yubel was doing in the game was not healthy. This isn't right. Being able to combo just for the sake of comboing on your opponent's turn, making this boards that just say you can't play, you can't do anything, and the Mulcharmy's coming in and getting rid of that uninteractive play style is a win in my eyes for Yu-Gi-Oh! And sure, are we going to always have complaints in Yu-Gi-Oh? We are. Are we always going to not be in the same boat? Absolutely. But I think we can all agree, majority of us as players, that the Mulcharmy cards, especially Fuel Loss, has changed Yu-Gi-Oh! In the TCG for the better. And when the Mulcharmy Nyalas comes out in January, I think that will that will be the final nail in the coffin, and we will not have any of these degenerate combo decks being the majority of the competitive scene. What I would like to see and what's happening in Yu-Gi-Oh!, and I'm very excited for this, is that the competitive scene in TCG is not going to be filled with mid-range decks. Decks that just play fairly, and what is going to determine good players now is going to be you knowing your deck well enough. You can play a fun deck, know it well, and then you can possibly top. It's not going to be about what is the best meta card, but it's going to be about the player that knows their deck the best. Too much in Yu-Gi-Oh!, especially in TCG, I can't say anything for OCG, but in TCG it's always been about placing the cards that just say no into your deck and being able to just deny your opponent play. It's not really been a two-player game. But now, with the fact that all the generic negates are banned, the fact that all the prominent floodgates are banned or are limited to one, Yu-Gi-Oh! In the TCG is looking very, very healthy and extremely great. And for the fact that we have the Rarity Collection 3 coming out November 8th, so a week's time from now, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is really looking in a sexy place right now. So let's go to the overall conclusion. Let's start the overall conclusion. So what I'd like to say is that when it comes to the Mulcharmy cards, I think they've done fantastic things for the TCG. And overall, it is a step, I would say, in the right direction for Yu-Gi-Oh! As a whole. There are going to be times when Yu-Gi-Oh! Isn't going to be in the best of places. And times when we will just disagree as a community. But I think now, especially in the TCG, with the fact that the speed of the game has now been solved, I would say mostly, I am optimistic about the future of Yu-Gi-Oh! I am optimistic about where we are going to go with Yu-Gi-Oh! As it stands moving forward. Looking at 2025 is a brighter future, a brighter path for this game known as Yu-Gi-Oh! Looking at it and seeing that we have Rarity Collection 3 coming out within the next week. Looking into the future and seeing that we can start 2025 with cheaper decks, cheaper archetypes, and everything being affordable from 2024, with a few exceptions being the Mulcharmy cards and Dominus cards. The future is looking bright, my fellow students, and it couldn't be a better time to be playing Yu-Gi-Oh! At this point in time. We're starting with a fresh slate in 2025, and I'm here for it, to the ride that we're going to take going into the future with Yu-Gi-Oh! And that's all I've got to say in this video.
We come to the end of this video. So, as I like to say, you are one step closer to becoming a Yu-Gi-Oh! Master. My fate, right, is in your hands.